Thank you for joining us. It's another episode of Talk with Toni. My guest is Shermann Thomas, who is a Chicago historian, right?
Yes, ma'am. Very honored to meet you, and thanks for having me, Madam President.
All right. So you're a historian, but we're going to tell the story a little bit about how you got to be a historian. Now that's an interesting story. Tell us, give this a short version of how you got here.
Basically, I arrived to being a Chicago historian because of my father. He was a Chicago police officer for 30 years, a part of Mayor Harold Washington's bodyguard detail, Eugene Sawyer's bodyguard detail. So just a real big Chicago guy, Chicago historian himself, right? A novice. So you couldn't use this car if you couldn't tell him the grid, right? What 100 east you were going to be. So all that information just kind of stuck with me, and my curiosity, wanted more. So from there, I went to public schools, went to Eastern Illinois University. In between that I was a lifeguard for the park district, so I would see a lot of different neighborhoods, working at different parks that I wouldn't normally see in the neighborhood that I lived in. So just all those things kind of united my passion for Chicago's history.
Okay, so you're native born,
Yes.
and you've got a kind of a sense of the city from your dad, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, but you're also a social media sensation. So tell us a little bit about where you get there.
Well, back in November, my daughter there's an app, Tik Tok. It's a video app. You can 60-second videos about you name it that's on the internet. So my daughter wanted to go viral. She wants to be an actress or a singer. I suggested that we do history. I said, hey, there's no cute 8-year-old girls doing Chicago history. Let me feed you lines and you'll go viral. So she's like, nobody cares about history. That stuff's boring. I think I told the story of how out of Chicago we created the time zones based off of the railroads here. And the video, I went to sleep, it was like 100 views. When I woke up, it was like 8,000. I was like, oh, okay.
All right, so quick story. Chicago invented time zones.
Yes.
Okay, tell us that story.
So before that, most cities kept time by the sun being its high point in the air. So someone would literally go outside and say, okay, the sun's in the middle of the sky, and turn over an hourglass, and that would be considered 12 noon or high noon, and that's how time was kept from that point on. But high noon wasn't the same in Chicago as it was in Columbus. So if you got on a train leaving Chicago, thinking you would arrive at Columbus at 11, you might get there at 12, you might get there earlier. It was real hard to do business. So all of the railroad magnates came to Chicago, and right on Jackson and LaSalle, it was the Pacific Hotel. They chopped up this country into time zones and said this is going to be Eastern time zone, this is going to be Central. And it stuck. They petitioned the United States Congress, and we've been all living in the time zones ever since.
So the time zones grew out of the railroad industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah. The railroad industry was the heart of Chicago, though. We were the heart of that industry. We were dead smack in the middle. You can't have transcontinental travel without Chicago.
There you go. So not only do we have one of the Great Lakes in Lake Michigan and the Chicago River and all the tributaries, but we also have the railroads. We're the central part of the railroad system in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, so that's one of your stories, but there are lots of other stories. Which one is your favorite?
I think my favorite Chicago history story, it's not maybe necessarily a story, but the things that we invented. We're such a city of innovation. We invented the remote control. How good is that you don't have to get out your seat to change the channel, In a lot of parts, we invented the car radio down at Zenith Laboratories on 51st and Sheridan. So, imagine what traveling is with your family without the car radio. We invented Butterfinger, right? That's a beautiful thing. We invented the chocolate brownie. So those type of things and the innovation that springs from Chicago is probably my favorite part about Chicago. We invented soap operas.
How did we invent soap operas?
Their name has escaped me at this moment, but the creator of soap operas is a Chicagoan, and she worked at the radio station where they basically would just play live music and disseminate the news. And she wrote a script, and they read the script right here in Chicago on Rush Street, and that was the first time ever that a soap opera was disseminated. She also went on to write the television soap operas.
Okay, so she invented sort of radio soaps, and then that got transferred to television.
Absolutely.
Television became more popular. Oh, wow. Okay. Why do you think Chicago was a center for innovation?
Because we were America's first baby. A lot of times, people with big families know the youngest gets to watch everybody. And so they're usually the person most astute they go on to be great things, right? A lot of the older brothers play college ball, right? But the baby brother's the one that goes pro because he had to go against the big brothers his whole life. And so that's Chicago, us going against New York, excuse me, and Boston and Philadelphia. We're the second city because of that. Someone to you build the Empire State Building? Okay, we're gonna build the Sears Tower, you know. You build Madison Square Garden, okay, we'll build the Chicago Stadium. It's, I guess, coming out of the Chicago fire, that's just who we are.
The competition with older cities on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You're a historian, but that's sort of, it's not a hobby exactly. It's your life in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But what do you do for a living?
I work for ComEd proudly. I'm an area operator.
You're an electrician.
Yes. I work local 15 IBEW. I do the high voltage stuff, so 134,000 volts of electricity. I energize, de-energize transformers. I work the downtown power grid.
So, what connection is there between the work you do to survive and clearly your love for history and that work?
That is an amazing question. The first room built in any building is the electrical vault. You got to power. You got to power the power tools that are going to continue the construction. You got to power the crane. You got to power the elevators, even the outside skiffs that's going to take the workers. So the very first room, they build the structure, then they create an electrical vault. And so a lot of times, because of the job I have, I get to go in the oldest room of every downtown building. And just from there, the curiosity takes off. I'm in the industrial spaces of all the buildings. I get to see the buildings at scale. They look really small in a lobby or in an office. But we're in the basement of the Daily Center. It's humongous. You really feel like you're on 2 city blocks. And so I'm so fortunate in that I also sometimes can convince an engineer to show me Frank Lloyd Wright's office right after I've done my job, of course, and time permitting. Also, I get to park anywhere I want in the ComEd truck because I'm doing work, right? So if I want to take a picture of Marina City just because the sun looks amazing, because I'm in the ComEd truck, I can pull over and take that picture.
So it gives you a license.
Oh, it's a beautiful license.
All right, so you're an electrician, and that takes you in sort of the innards of the buildings.
Yes.
And as you point out, the electrical vaults are the first part of the building that's constructed. They're kind of the guts of the building. All right, you're an architecture buff.
Yes.
Some of your videos have been about architecture.
Yes. Well, if you have a skyscraper standing in the sky that's older than 1930, it's because of the Chicago School of Architecture. That's the only reason that we started.
Because?
Using steel as a structure for support as opposed to brick. That comes from us.
So we were the first to frame our buildings with steel.
Yeah,
build
absolutely.
our buildings with steel.
Yeah. Jen Jensen, yes. Yep. Also famously helped design Humboldt Park.
So he was not only a landscape architect, he
Yes.
designed buildings as well as landscapes.
Yep.
I thought he designed like Central Park in New York or something.
Yeah, no, it's a different. The people who did Central Park did our Homestead is the guy's name.
Oh, okay.
And they did Washington Park.
Washington Park.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You've talked a little bit about some of your favorite of your videos. Give us another couple that we could use as examples for the kind of work you do.
Well, the diagonal streets for one, right? If you're a visitor to Chicago, someone tells you it's a grid if you get lost, right? It's a grid, how are you lost? But, you get on Milwaukee Avenue thinking that you're on a north, south, or east-west street, you're going to end up on the other side of town.
Right.
But also, those streets predate Chicago. They were formerly Native American trails. They had different names. They are the reason Chicago is Chicago because they offered people, you could walk from Waukegan to Chicago on one of those diagonal streets, and that fostered trade, and that gave us the ability to grow. And also, some of those streets are named after worthy people. Elston was an alderman, and he was a pretty cool dude, especially like as a man of his time, to be born in a time where people were predominantly racist, and he was not. That's a testament to the type of guy he was. And his son went on to serve General Grant in the Civil War. So I think it's kind of cool to know why we name these streets what we name them.
Okay, so we superimpose the grid over Native American trails, and the Native American trails are more often the diagonals that we find.
That's correct.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what else do you want to share with us?
I think it's important to know the intersectionality also. Sometimes history isn't the best thing to study, right? And there are groups of people who have been marginalized throughout history that have given and made amazing impacts on the city that help us all, one of which the fire pole, right? There, regardless of your race or your sex, you've played fireman as a kid, and first thing you ever wanted to do was slide down that pole. That invention, that thought comes from Chicago's all-black fire company, Engine 21. A guy named George Reed was asleep on the third floor hayloft, and the fire bell went off, and the boss told him, Captain Keon said, if you're the last person on this truck again, that's going to be your butt. And so quickly thinking, he used the hay pole to slide down to the first floor, and he beat everybody down, and the captain said, oh, that is amazing. So they sanded the wood pole, and they started using it. But everybody in the city started calling them monkeys because the black guys were sliding down the pole. But at the end of the year, the fire captain or the fire chief would give an award to the fastest unit who responded to the fires the fastest. Year after year, Engine 21 won because they were using that pole. And by 1880, all Chicago fire stations were ordered to install a fireman's pole. And just think about how many lives are saved because of the expediency that firemen and EMS people use. And that invention comes from an African-American and a white person who saw the brilliance in something and gave it to the world. That type of, whatever your race is, you slide down a fireman's pole if you're a fireman right now. And that comes from Chicago. It gives me great pride.
Interesting. So it came out of a black firehouse.
Yes, Engine 21. Yep.
Engine 21. Where is Engine 21 today? Is it still in the black community?
Sadly, it was in what was formerly the black community. And that's another thing that's very important to discuss. It would have set on maybe what's about Clark and Taylor right now, thereabout. Okay. And that was formerly the African-American neighborhood. So just the demographic shifts of the city can be studied by studying our innovation. There was a second fire in 1874, no, a little later than that. The Engine 21 Firehouse burned down, though. It was a point in a big fire, a neighborhood fire, and they didn't rebuild it.
Okay. All right, so it came out of an African-American firehouse that's no longer with us.
Yes.
So we've lost a lot of our landmarks, a lot of our historic buildings. Which one of those would you want to call to our attention besides the firehouse?
Well, famously, the Chicago Stock Exchange is a tragedy. That it was famously tore down. Richard Nichol lost his life trying to preserve some of the artifacts. The Art Institute of Chicago has the outside wall that says Chicago Stock Exchange on the eastern side of the museum as sort of tribute.
Archway.
Yeah, that archway. Yeah, but it was a very beautiful building that didn't need to be torn down. And just think about the lessons that we could have learned and share with future generations. So that one stings a little bit too. More than a loss, I'm glad we're starting to see the importance of keeping them. Right, we're keeping Emmett Till's house. We're converting Lou Palmer's mansion into a museum, and I think those things are very important.
One of the things that's different in Chicago than other places in the country, surely Los Angeles, which is a newer city, and even our eastern cities, is the extent to which, though, we've been able to preserve our historic architecture. Why is that, do you think?
I think it's because in that architecture we see our culture. We see the builders. A lot of this stuff was built by hand. I think about the poor horses that brought the cobblestone in, right? That before 1910, 1912, it wasn't engines that were bringing the bricks in. You see it like it's Tao Restaurant now, but it was formerly Chicago Historical Society. That was all horses brought that in, and men hoisted it. So just to think about the talent and our skill that we had as
building the city.
In building this city. And again, like I always say, it's this city is the architectural blueprint for so much of Chicago. Because of the Great Fire, architects from all over the world got to come and practice and hone their skills. And so it's important to keep that architecture as a testament to Chicago's vitality.
Okay, so the fire was a catalyst for innovation.
Yes.
And a magnet for people who wanted to make a name for themselves in the field. And as a result, we have this wonderful historical legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. In every field, and at Cook County Hospital, the first blood bank, right? That's something that can only be done in Chicago because we were also the place that invented the refrigerated train, right, for the stockyards, So we were already lending ourselves to being preservationists, in multiple capacities. So, so it's just a great place.
That's a good place to end this discussion. Thank you very much, Sherman, for joining us.
It's my honor.
Fascinating conversation, and we thank you for your good work.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for joining us for Talk with Toni.